Love 'em or hate 'em, there's no doubting the fact that jump scares are among the most memorable mainstays in the horror genre that are used to instill fear in audiences. Although many will argue that contemporary modern horror overuses them nowadays, the 15 films that I'm about to go over are living proof that you can still scare the living shit out of people with jump scares when used in moderation. What's up, guys? Today I wanted to do a video that's a little bit different than the last few that I've done. I don't want to just list off movies that are my favorite or talk about a new release because I just feel like I'm getting a little bit bored of that. So today we're going to go through my top 15 favorite jump scares in horror of all time. If you've watched my channel very much, you might know that horror is my favorite genre. And when it comes to horror, the jump scare is sort of an integral part of the formula. Although generally speaking nowadays they're sort of frowned upon, some of the best movies out there have managed to make the jump scare kind of the most effective part of their movie. There are several sort of key components that go into a good jump scare, such as slow building tension that sort of leads up to the crescendo that is the actual scare itself. Oftentimes you'll have a loud sound inserted, but sometimes there isn't. Sometimes the image of what you're seeing is scary enough that you don't really need a loud sound effect to sort of startle people. And it was really tough in this video to narrow it down to just 15 films, 15 scenes in all of horror because there are so many good ones out there. So this is obviously just my opinion. Now let's get into the list. Before I jump into the list, I do want to give some honorable mentions that I have saved here. First of all, the Nun Scene from the Conjuring 2. The crawler reveal from The Descent. Jason appears at the end of Friday the 13th. The camouflage scene from Signs.
What?
And the pig from Saw. There are so many classics. Obviously, I couldn't include them all on the list, so those are just some honorable mentions. And there are even others that I think should have deserved a spot on there. Number 15, though, is the Lawnmower from Sinister. Part of what makes Sinister such a scary movie to me is the fact that Ethan Hawke is sitting here watching these snuff films. If you've ever watched any true crime and sort of seen actual footage from some incidents, you'll know that it's one of the most mortifying things that somebody can experience. And sort of seeing that through Ethan Hawke's character is part of what makes this movie so terrifying. And of course you get to this one scene where he's watching, obviously, the murder of an entire family. And this tape is just called Lawnmower, I believe. Sounds innocent enough, and as you're watching it, nothing's really happening, and then bam, out of nowhere, somebody gets shredded by the lawnmower. This is definitely one of those jump scares that's sort of accentuated by a loud sound effect that comes out of nowhere when you're sitting there watching a scene that's mostly quiet. Some people might find that a bit cheap, but for me, the fact that this is in one of those little snuff films and that it's so sudden and shocking makes it a really scary scene that absolutely deserves a spot on the list. Number 14, the closet scene from The Ring. The Ring is a movie that sort of took a long time to grow on me. The more I watch it, the more I appreciate it because it's sort of the quieter moments in this movie that are more scary. Oftentimes, what you don't see can be more terrifying than what you do see, and that's why seeing the aftermath of someone who is killed by the ring curse is so terrifying. In this scene, two characters are just sitting in a kitchen talking. There's nothing really threatening about it, and then all of a sudden, it cuts to this closet door opening and you seeing this person's mangled face after she was killed.
I saw her face.
Again, this is one of those scares that doesn't really have a loud noise to accompany it. There is a sound effect used, but it's not a sort of really boisterous, obnoxious sound. It's just sort of really creepy. I think one of my issues with this film is when you move into the third act and you actually see this ghost terrorize people and kill people, it becomes a little bit less scary because you see exactly how it happens. But this scene does a perfect job of using the unknown to absolutely scare the shit out of whoever's watching it. Number 13 is Hide and Clap from The Conjuring. This is a scene that is, well, it may not be the scariest scene in The Conjuring, but it's definitely the scariest jump scare. What I think James Wan did such an excellent job with in The Conjuring is he took a traditional ghost story. You know, we've seen so many movies about people that move into a house that's haunted by evil spirits and they begin to terrorize them. But in this case, you have a demon that is using a children's game that this woman's children were just playing to kind of terrorize her.
Hey, Want to play hide and clap?
Also, if you're the least bit scared of the dark or basements or both, you're definitely going to find this scene to be really chilling. Obviously, you've got the hands coming out from behind her to clap. That's definitely the scariest part about this scene. Again, this is another one that isn't super loud and obnoxious, and I really like that about it too. Number 17 is The Tall Man from It Follows. This is a really strong low-budget horror movie that really doesn't have any big grand special effects or anything like that. And in the case of this scene, all you have is a really tall dude walking into a room, and somehow it's scary as shit. There's something about the fact that he's so tall and that he emerges from this dark, ominous hallway, and the fact that none of the other characters can see him, only our protagonist, makes it absolutely horrifying. I think It Follows also has an excellent soundtrack, and that definitely adds to the pure terror of this scene.
See? Everything's okay.
Number 11 is going to be Sloth from Seven. Seven isn't even really a true horror film. It's more of a crime thriller / mystery, and it's a really damn good one at that. It's one of my favorite films of all time, but it still has a really disturbing jump scare scene. As Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman are trying to solve this horrific serial murder case, they come upon one of the victims of this serial killer, and first of all, the implications of what this victim went through are absolutely horrifying, to say the least. But the ultimate reveal that this man who is absolutely just looks completely dead is still alive is just...
You got what you deserved. He's alive! He's alive! The cocksucker's alive! Stop it!
The makeup in this scene is a pretty significant achievement, and I think it definitely adds to the effect. Number 10 is The Killer's Eye reveal in Black Christmas. Now, this is a horror movie that I actually had never seen until recently, and I'm shocked by that. I'm shocked that this movie doesn't get more praise and more acclaim close to something like Halloween or Friday the 13th, because this movie is really effective in building suspense. And again, this is one of those jump scares that isn't very loud, it's not obnoxious. Instead, it's just a really creepy camera pan over to someone's eye peeking through a closet door. Of course, this is briefly after the protagonist in the movie discovers that a person who's been calling and harassing her sorority house is actually calling from inside the house, which is just really creepy. And of course, you've got this really disturbing atmosphere built through this sorority house as she walks through it, which is not a very smart idea, but you know what? She's trying to be altruistic and look after her sisters. That's pretty admirable.
Agnes, it's me, Billy. Agnes, don't you tell what we did, Agnes.
And through the entire movie, you never get a close look at what this guy actually looks like, and I think that makes him all the more terrifying, especially when you think about the fact that he never gets caught either. Number 9 is The Clown from Poltergeist. I know not everyone has a fear of inanimate objects like toys coming alive and attacking them, and I wouldn't say that I do either, but there's something about the clown in this movie that is just really creepy. And of course, you have this scene where the child is in bed, and he's kind of uncomfortable with the clown sitting in this chair across from the bed staring at him, so he throws the jacket on it and looks away for a second, and then it's gone. And this is just... it's one of those scenes that plays with your expectations because you have him looking under the bed and you're constantly waiting for that scare, and it doesn't happen for a long time until he leans back up and of course the thing actually pops out and attacks him. This scene is especially scary because in this instance, this is not a poltergeist that is simply out to harass and scare people. It's actually trying to kill them. Number 8 is Franklin's Demise from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If you've ever played Dead by Daylight, Franklin's Demise being the name for this scene is sort of a little reference to that. Again, this is one of those scenes that doesn't have a big boom in the soundtrack or anything like that, but it is accompanied by the loud sound of a chainsaw as it revs up.
Sally, I hear something. Stop! Stop!
There's just something about the fact that a lot of these older movies look so grainy that makes them terrifying. When it's pitch black, you can't see very far off in the distance, and all of a sudden Leatherface is just there. This entire movie is so terrifying because it doesn't feel that far off from reality. Like, there could be a family of inbred cannibals out there just waiting for victims to stumble across their home and get massacred. Number 7, Michael decorates in Halloween. I would say this is probably one of the most classic jump scares out there in a horror movie. Of course, you have Michael Myers hiding in the closet, popping out when a character approaches to open it, and then you get the iconic kill where he pins him against the door of the cupboard.
Come on now.
There are a number of things that are really effective about this scene, from John Carpenter's score to, of course, just the physical appearance of Michael Myers and that iconic mask. And I could definitely see a case for a jump scare like this being maybe frowned upon in today's world because it's very simple in the way that it's structured. But it remains one of the most memorable scenes in what is probably the most iconic slasher movie ever made.
We're gonna draw a little bit of everybody's blood. We're gonna find out who's the thing.
Number 6 is The Blood Test from The Thing. The Thing is another one of my absolute favorite horror movies of all time. Not only is it so great with all the body horror and just disgusting practical creature effects that still hold up incredibly well today, but it's also a great film about paranoia and all of these characters trying to determine how they can learn to trust one another in this situation. Who is the thing? Who is not the thing? And of course, nothing encapsulates that better than the blood test scene. Of course, this is where Kurt Russell has everyone tied down. They all provide a blood sample, and he begins to use a hot wire to poke the blood and see if it tries to escape. And the first time I watched this movie, I don't really know what I expected, but I did not expect the blood to absolutely just jump out of the vial.
You were the only one that could have got to that blood. We'll do you last.
Get away from me! Retreating!
It also just sort of feels like these characters were about to have a conversation, and then bam, they're thrust back into the action. Number 5 is the reveal of Mother in Psycho. I kind of felt like I had to put something from Psycho in this list, and although certain things in the movie haven't held up super well, such as the one scene where the dude is tumbling down the stairs as Norman murders him, this scene, however, has always absolutely terrified me. It's towards the end of the film. We have our protagonist exploring the Norman Bates home, and she goes downstairs and she discovers his mother's corpse. And just the reveal of her spinning that chair around and seeing that she's, at this point, pretty much a decayed skeleton is just horrific, because not only does it imply her death, but it also sort of reveals that it was Norman doing all these things the entire time, dressed up as her, and that just really creeps me the hell out. Most people would probably put the shower scene above this, but I think this is a really underrated way to sort of end the movie, and is just as iconic as the rest of it.
Ben Gardner's boat. That's Ben Gardner's boat. It's all banged up. Sure, I know him. He's a fisherman.
Number 4 is Ben Gardner's boat from Jaws. Jaws is a movie that doesn't have a whole lot of jump scares, and this one doesn't even involve the shark, and it's still absolutely terrifying. Of course, we have a drunken Sheriff Brody and Hooper out on their boat looking for all these other people that are out for the bounty on the shark. And of course, they come upon Ben Gardner's boat. It's all beat up, and you know deep down something really bad happened, but you're never shown that. And in fact, by this point in the movie, you really haven't seen much of the shark. That's another thing that just adds to the absolute terror of this scene. The moment Hooper gets in the water and says, "I'll be right back," I'm just like, oh, like if I had never seen that movie, I would totally expect him to die in this scene. But the scare in this scene comes not from the shark, but from the head of Ben Gardner, who is still chilling in his boat. You get a really nice look at his decayed face, and which is brought to life with really good special effects. And then, of course, you've got John Williams' horrific score start to kick in, and you're just like, dude, get out of the water as quickly as you can. This is definitely a scene that's enhanced for people who have thalassophobia or are just scared of the ocean or sharks in general. I'm one of those people, so I've always had a soft spot for this scene.
You sure?
Look around. Are you sure that it's not there? I mean, it's got to be around there somewhere.
Number 3 is the air shaft from Alien. Alien is my favorite horror movie of all time and one of my favorite films of all time in general, so I have a little bit of a bias towards this movie, and I had trouble deciding which scene I wanted to pick from this. Obviously, I guess you could consider the chestburster scene to be a jump scare, but I think this one might be a little bit more effective because it just brings the claustrophobia of these air vents to life in such an effective way. And by this point in the movie, a lot of people thought that Captain Dallas was sort of the protagonist of the film. So when he goes in there to sort of seal off all these vents as he goes along and try to weed the alien out so that they can launch it out into space, you don't really expect him to die. And of course, the characters have a machine with them that allows them to sort of see the alien's location in relation to him. But of course, he happens to go the wrong way when he tries to get out of the vents, and it ultimately leads to his doom.
Move! Get out of there!
I love how when you rewatch this scene, if you look closely, you can sort of see the shine of the alien's dome right behind him as he's making his way towards it. And that reveal of the alien sort of reaching out to grab him is probably one of the best looks of the creature you have in the movie, but it's so brief and it's so shocking that you don't really process it the first time you watch the movie. And of course, you have that terrifying screech that the creature lets out as it grabs him. That's just sends shivers down the spine. Number 2 is Come Play With Us, Danny from The Shining. This isn't really a jump scare, I guess, but I am going to count it because I think it's more scary than about 90% of the jump scares that are out there. In this scene, of course, you have the young Danny Torrance exploring the Overlook Hotel that his family is watching over, and just the fact that it's this massive building that's empty just makes it really creepy and unsettling to me. The hallways, like, it's very reminiscent of hotels that you've probably been to before, but it also, in addition to being familiar, just feels something is off. And it's through this scene that he sort of learns the horrific nature of his ability to shine and see the ghosts of people that have died. Of course, the 2 little girls show up and say, come play with us, Danny, or whatever. And it immediately cuts to their just mutilated corpses after they've been murdered. And it's just such a jarring shift.
Come play with us, Danny. Forever. And ever.
Again, I love that there isn't really a big obnoxious sound effect to accompany this scare. It's more so just thinking about the actual murder of these 2 girls itself that's scary. Of course, there are other scenes in this movie that are terrifying, but this to me is just above all of them. But number 1 is the decapitation from The Exorcist 3. I think this is one of the most underrated horror films out there, one of the most underrated sequels. I think a lot of people are sort of coming around on the movie as of late, but nothing in this movie can top what is probably the scariest jump scare I've ever watched. This is another movie that I hadn't watched until recently, so I still sort of remember the first time I watched this scene and just how horrified I was. I kind of had to pause the movie and stand up for a second because it's just shocking. What this scene does so well is it gives you a false sense of security because you have this nurse working a night shift and she's at the nurse's station. There are other people around. She even walks in and finds somebody sleeping and there's a false jump scare there. Not a huge fan of that, but it does give you this false sense of security that, you think everything's all right. She hears a noise, she walks into her room, apparently sees nothing, closes the door, turns around to walk away, and immediately you see this cloaked figure walk out with these massive shears held up. And then, of course, it cuts to a decapitated statue, so that sort of implies what her fate was. Again, this scene really plays with what you don't see being more scary than what you actually see. I will admit, though, part of what makes this scene so scary is that sound effect that plays when the jump scare actually happens. It's very loud, it's very ominous. But again, I'm one of those people who has zero issues with jump scares if A, they're slowly built up to with genuine suspense, and B, the jump scare is actually scary itself without that sound effect. And I think that this movie would still be terrifying without that sound effect. And when someone like me who absolutely loves horror has to pause a movie, stand up and take my headphones off for a minute because it was such a frightening scene, I think the movie did something right. That's going to do it for this video, guys. I know this wasn't really a very scripted video, and it probably isn't going to be very long once I edit it together, but I just wanted to do a video about jump scares, about something that isn't about a film itself, and more so a component of films. And because horror is my favorite genre, I figured this would be a great place to start. As always, be sure to comment what your favorite jump scare of all time is below. Like the video if you want to see more, and I'll see you guys in the next one.